Listen to this. Seasonal affective disorder is a type of depression that reoccurs each year during the winter.
That's right, but there are things you can do to relieve or at least lessen the symptoms. Here to fill us in from Prisma Health Upstate, Dr. Frank Clark. Thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Thank you for having me, and good morning.
Good morning. Can you tell us a little bit about what seasonal affective disorder is, kind of let our viewers know?
Sure. So I think oftentimes people think of seasonal affective disorder as its own distinct entity, and it's actually a subtype of what we classify as mood disorders. So that would include major depressive disorder, bipolar 1 disorder, and bipolar 2 disorder. And so what we know about seasonal affective disorder is that it comes and goes with the seasons. And so I think most individuals are know that usually around the winter time, people tend to hibernate, they're more isolated. And so you can actually have two patterns of seasonal affective disorder. There's the fall-winter pattern, and then there's one that is less common and probably not known about. There's actually a spring-summer pattern of seasonal affective disorder. And so less common, but oftentimes during that pattern, the spring-summer, people can actually have more anxiety, they may experience irritability, agitation, and their sleep patterns can be disturbed, and so they may actually have insomnia. As opposed to the fall-winter pattern, people tend to hibernate, they actually may sleep more, they actually may eat more, and so there's a risk of weight gain during that time.
So with the more common one, which is of course during the fall and winter, is it the lack of sun that we're getting?
You hit on a good point. So I'm from Chicago, and so we know that usually through most months through the year, it stays pretty cold, and we don't have that exposure to sunlight compared to living in South Carolina. So basically, the lack of sun can be a risk factor, and they've looked at studies with vitamin D, and a lot of individuals have low vitamin D levels, which is responsible for bone growth and other things. We know that low vitamin D levels can actually affect our mood. So if we're not getting enough sunlight, that's going to affect how we feel. And so you think about it, in the winter, the days are getting shorter. We have this little hormone in our brain called melatonin that usually peaks at night. And so given the shorter days and it gets dark out early, you're going to have an overproduction of melatonin, which then can disrupt a person's sleep-wake cycles. And that kind of also impacts that biological clock that we call like our circadian rhythms.
So if someone thinks they have this, or if they're feeling down, what can they do? Is it something where they could take a vitamin and it would help, or what should they do?
Good question. So we know that it's not a one-size-fits-all treatment, so we look at a holistic approach to treatment. So one thing could be medications. We know that, again, seasonal affective disorder is a subtype of depression, so serotonin is also helpful in regulating our mood, our appetite, and our sleep, so someone may benefit from a medication like Prozac or Zoloft. The mainstay of treatment since the 1980s, we know, is something called phototherapy or light therapy, where you can have a light box and have exposure to artificial light, basically, to help given that there's there's not enough sunlight exposure during these winter months. And so usually you would do that starting in the early morning for about 20 to 60 minutes during the day, starting in the early fall through the spring. And then there's also talk therapy, where we look at how our thoughts and feelings influence our behaviors. It's also known as cognitive behavioral therapy.
Wow, that's great. That's great news. I mean, I have one of those light boxes because I think I have, seasonal affective disorder. Like I told you, I've moved to different places, and it seems like the places without seasons, like Los Angeles, I seem to be the happiest. There wasn't a fluctuation in my mood. So it's good to know that you can have either medication, that there are options out there. You got the light box, and you got cognitive behavioral therapy.
Or move to a warmer climate. So we know that the farther you're away from the far south or north of the equator, you're more likely to experience seasonal affective disorder.
Well, that's why I moved from New York to South Carolina. But
choice.
Apparently this week has been a little bit hard for us.
I agree. Even waking up this morning, I'm an early riser. I kind of felt fatigued, so these days can do it to you.
All right. Well, Dr. Clark, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being with you this morning.
And it's nice to know you may not be going crazy. It's not that. It's just the season.
And you're not alone.
And you're not alone. Exactly. Things will get better in the summer, hopefully, and in the spring as well. We will be back with more Carolina Morning right after this.